Hi, I'm Joan Wrench, and this is Carol Joy Harris, and we're here to talk to you today about California State Proposition 1. You'll see it on your ballot as authorizes $6.38 billion in bonds to build mental health treatment facilities for those with mental health and substance use challenges. It provides housing for the homeless. It is a legislative statute. So, Carol Joy, can you please tell us what is the question behind Proposition 1?
Sure. Prop 1's question is, should the state change how counties can use funds from the Mental Health Services Act and issue new bonds to build treatment facilities and housing for people with mental illness and substance use disorders and for homeless veterans?
And what's the background behind Prop 1?
Currently, counties receive money from statewide taxes and federal grants to provide mental health care services. About 1/3 of this money, $2 to $3.5 billion annually, comes from the 2004 Mental Health Services Act, which is funded from a 1% tax on income over $1 million. 95% of this tax money goes to counties. The rest goes to support state mental health programs.
Are there restrictions on how counties can spend the MHSA money?
Yes, counties can only spend these funds on treatment for people with mental illness, including treatment for drug or alcohol addiction, and prevention programs for people at risk for developing mental illness.
And how do counties provide these services now?
Well, most of the money goes to direct treatment programs such as outpatient services and crisis prevention. A smaller amount goes to housing and support services.
Does California have enough places where people can get mental health care and drug and alcohol treatment?
According to the Legislative Analyst's Office, California would need to be able to see over 10,000 more people at any one time than is possible today. The state provides some money to build more facilities, but those funds do not meet this need.
What do we know about rates of mental illness or substance use among people who experience homelessness?
The 2022 U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development estimates that approximately 171,500 people in California experienced homelessness in January 2022. And nearly half of that population suffers from severe mental illness and or chronic substance use disorders. Another 10,400 are veterans.
So, what does Proposition 1 propose?
Proposition 1 has two major parts. It changes how money from the Mental Health Services Act can be used, and it approves a $6.4 billion bond to build more mental health care and drug or alcohol treatment facilities and more housing for people with mental health or substance use challenges.
Let's talk about proposed changes to the Mental Health Services Act. Can you give us some more detail, please?
Sure. It gives a greater share of MHSA funds to the state for its mental health services, 10% compared to the current 5%, with more going toward housing and personalized support services like employment assistance and education. It also allows MHSA money to be used for drug and alcohol treatment for people without mental illness.
Is there currently oversight on these funds?
Yes, and Prop 1 would increase the size of the Oversight Commission from 16 to 27 voting members.
And now, can you tell us about the bond portion of the proposition?
Yes, Prop 1 authorizes the sale of bonds to raise $6.38 billion.
And how will these dollars be distributed?
$4.4 billion would go to build facilities for treatment of people with mental illness and substance use disorders, and $2 billion would go to build or renovate housing for people who are homeless with mental illness or substance use disorders, and for chronically unhoused veterans.
So, what would the fiscal impact of Prop 1 be?
Prop 1 would shift roughly $140 million annually of existing tax revenue for mental health, drug, and alcohol treatment from counties to the state. And it would increase the state bond repayment costs to about $310 million annually for 30 years, less than 0.5% of the state's budget. Payment would be made from the general fund.
What are supporters saying?
Supporters are saying that Prop 1 provides funds for creating supportive housing settings where Californians who suffer from mental illness, substance use, and homelessness can live, recover, and thrive. They also say this proposition makes better use of existing funds by prioritizing getting people off the streets and into appropriate care. See a list of supporters on your screen.
What about opponents? What do they say?
Opponents say Prop 1 diverts almost 1/3 of the MHSA money from services that counties already offer by imposing state priorities in favor of housing interventions and does not add money to existing mental health service programs. They also say Prop 1 will cost taxpayers more than $10 billion and puts taxpayers on the hook for decades to pay back new bonds. This isn't free money. See a list of opponents on your screen.
Can you now tell us about campaign financing?
Yes, at the time of this recording, supporters have contributed $11.7 million. See the top donors on your screen. And opponents have contributed a total of $1,000 to date. See the donor on your screen.
In conclusion, what does a yes vote mean?
A yes vote renames the 2004 Mental Health Services Act to the Behavioral Health Services Act and would expand it to include services for persons with substance use disorders without mental illness. It changes how revenue from the MHSA is spent under the law, including requiring that 30% of the funds would be allocated to housing intervention programs. It gives a greater share of MHSA funds to the state. It increases the size of the Oversight Commission from 16 to 27 voting members, and it issues $6.38 billion in bonds to fund housing for homeless individuals and veterans, including up to $4.4 billion for mental health care and alcohol or drug treatment facilities, and $2 billion for housing for homeless persons.
And a no vote, what does that mean?
A no vote means that no change would be made to the way the 2004 Mental Health Services Act is allocated, and $6.38 billion in bonds would not be issued.
Thank you, Carol Joy. This was very helpful.
My pleasure, Joan.